Nigerian Army denies reviewing some recent disciplinary cases in the military, as Nigerian Air Force extends free medical treatment to internally displaced persons in Yola.
Towards deepening democracy in Africa, legislative institutions urged to live up to their roles.
And for the fourth time in two separate tenures within 5 years, Nigeria takes leadership of the United Nations Security Council.
Dealing with one of Nigeria's nagging headaches, oil theft, that is in focus on Good Morning Nigeria today.
All right, Kingsley described it as oil headache. Of course, the oil theft in Nigeria as headache, but I say that is to put it mildly. In fact, it has become so complicated that it is almost impossible to diagnose it.
Well, revelations by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria earlier in June this year now estimates that Nigeria loses between 15 million and 25 million US dollars daily to oil theft.
Kingsley, if you also recall that right on this program last Monday, President Muhammadu Buhari lamented the huge sums of money lost to some unpatriotic Nigerians who connived to steal the country's oil resources. Now, Nigeria is also said to be on the list of countries with high incidence of oil theft in the world, according to data released by oilprice.com.
Well, the report states that as much as 400,000, but at least not less than 250,000 barrels of crude oil is lost daily, and that Nigeria ranks worse than Mexico, Iraq, Russia, and Indonesia. And these are, of course, the top 5 countries most plagued by oil theft.
That's right, Kingsley. Now, the immediate past Minister of Finance, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, once said Nigeria is losing $1 billion or 155 billion naira revenues every month to oil theft. Now, estimating the total loss at over 300,000 barrels per day.
Well, Claire, as I said, you know, the estimates range from anything from 250 to 400,000 barrels. But whatever the figure is, there have been allegations that Nigerians working in the oil industry connive with thieves, and that the funds are stolen through marketers who also collect subsidies for fuel that is not supplied. That is stealing actually with refined petroleum products. Our concern this morning has to do with crude oil theft.
All right, Kingsley, crude oil theft. And the questions many are asking, of course, will include why is it difficult to check the activities of these oil thieves? And what are the organs in charge of dealing with the activities of these saboteurs doing to check the drain on the nation's economy through oil theft? Now, those are some of the talking points in our conversation today on the program. I am Claire Adelabu Abdurazak, thanking you for beginning your day and week with us. And yes, always the pleasure is ours to have you join us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadola. I also join Claire welcoming you to the program, which is reaching you as always live from the Abuja headquarters studios of the Nigerian Television Authority. And this is its network service. As well, in the course of the program, we'll be taking our regular segments, Clay. And you just said earlier in one of the headlines that Nigeria has again assumed leadership of the United Nations Security Council. Now, this is usually on a rotational basis, Clay. Of
course, Kingsley, I understand is the 5th time since independence and the first time an elected member of the UN Security Council will assume presidency of the Council for the 4th time into separate tenures within 5 years. Now, the position starts running from 3rd of August 2015, that's today, Kingsley.
That's correct.
That's today. Professor Joy Ogu will take over from Ambassador Gerard van Boymen, the permanent representative of New Zealand, who held the position for the month of July.
Well, Nigeria was elected a non-permanent member of the Council on the 17th of October 2013, and is serving for the period 2014 to 2015.
Yes, that's right, Kingsley. Nigeria previously served in the council from 1966 to 1967, 1978 to 1979, 1994 to 1995, and 2011 to 2012. We hope to join the Nigerian permanent representatives to the UN Security Council, Professor Joy Ogu, in the course of the program. Hopefully, Kingsley, we tried to, via Skype, we tried to link up with her, of course, last night. But we do hope to establish contact with her, hopefully.
That's correct, Claire. All right, as we said earlier, we will bring you our regular companion segments while the program lasts. Segments, of course, include newspaper review, business, and others. We're going over now to the newsroom to join Larry Bala Hassan for the news. Larry?
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning and welcome to the news. The Nigerian Army has denied report that it is reviewing some recent disciplinary cases in the military. A statement by the Acting Director, Army Public Relations, Sani Usman, says, for avoidance of doubt, the Army is only reviewing all recent disciplinary cases due to the wave of litigations and petitions by some aggrieved personnel. The statement further advised the public not to misconstrue the recent directive to mean total recall of dismissed and deserted soldiers. In the meantime, the 47 Nigerian Force Hospital Yola has embarked on the second phase of free medical treatment to the internally displaced persons in Yola in furtherance of its weekly medical outreach program. This week, the 47 NAF Mobile Medical is covering the Bajabure IDPs camp Yola, which has the largest number of IDPs.
This outreach is going to last for 1 month. Already we have done 2 weeks, that for 4 camps. We still have 4 camps remaining. So in the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to complete this phase.
Over 600 Nigerians deported from Cameroon have arrived Maiduguri, the Borno state capital. Reports say the returnees are being camped at the 450 housing estate.
3-bedroom house, 3-bedroom at Nogubio and Bika. Water have been provided there, food facilities, everything has been provided there. Toilet facilities have been provided. We are ready to receive them.
Nigerians have been implored to be patient with the present administration led by President Muhammadu Buhari in its drive to reposition the country. The appeal was made at an interreligious prayer summit for good governance, peace and stability in Abuja.
This nation called Nigeria, in Jesus' name we pray.
You continue to teach the leadership of this country, to direct them, to give them the wisdom so that they can pilot the affairs of the country the best way we all wish. Amen.
14,703 indigent students of Benue origin in tertiary institutions across the country have benefited from the 2014-2015 Senator David Marks Scholarship Foundation. The disbursement of the scholarship allowances was held at the National Open University, Otukpo.
Every blessed day, I pray that every Idoma son and girl, every Idoma boy and girl is properly educated, minimal functional education.
The Marks Scholarship Foundation for adding value and meaning to my life.
We, the 14 gifted girls, we are really appreciative, sir. We want to say thank you.
A non-governmental organization, the Obi Lulu Briggs Foundation, has commenced an advocacy on improving the life expectancy of people in the rural communities. The foundation was in Umudioga in Emoha local government area of River State to touch the lives of people at the official flag off of its 5-day free medical outreach in the community.
Lump swellings, the breast from different parts of the body. Those are the common ones.
I had problems, so I was operated yesterday. So, and the operation was successful.
Everything was done free. They did not collect money from me.
Since the inception of Obuja community, today we have not seen this kind of thing. So we hope that more of this will come.
Legislative institutions have been urged to take on the role of consolidating democratic ideals, especially in Africa, particularly as military rule becomes less attractive in the continent. This was the outcome of a capacity-building workshop in Accra, Ghana's capital, which had parliamentary staff from some West African countries in attendance. Cordelia Ukoma reports that it was organized by the National Legislative Institute, NILS, and the African Capacity Building Foundation.
ACBF sees the capacity building as a development process that required concerted effort over time. Indeed, the rationale for establishing ACBF was to ensure a paradigm shift from the traditional one-off technical assistance programs to a more sustained, process-driven grant funding that is dedicated by local context and agenda setting.
This is particularly critical for African Parliament as we look beyond activities and outputs to focus on actual results.
And that rounds off the morning news. It's now back to Claire and Kingsley for the continuation of Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, Laurie Bala Hassan, thank you very much for the news. And we're moving on now to business. And Kingsley, you recall that there's been, a number of policies and programs, and as well as strategies enunciated by successive governments to tackle unemployment and poverty. In this country. Now experts are calling for concerted effort to ensure that that challenge or that problem is resolved. And also coming up on the business news this morning, UNDP is extending support to Nigeria in harnessing as well as accounting for informal activities in the economy. Business news with Leah Katum Babatunde is next.
Hello and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria Business News. Dwindling resources have been a hot topic for socio-economic discourse as subnational governments continue to feel the bite of the global fall in oil prices. Experts say both the government and business community have to make commitment in deepening growth and wealth creation through economic strides that can aid in closing the gap of unemployment, reducing the divide of inequalities, and guaranteeing security.
This country is a country that is structured to share wealth that is not there, but the thing is there. Okay? What we are, if you now want the solution, is for the country to be structured so that we have a country that is structured to create wealth. It's when you create wealth, then you can share wealth. When you don't create wealth, then you end up sharing poverty.
He said states and local governments have to devise means of raising their revenue base for self-sustainability, as dependence on monthly allocation from the Federation account is now not realistic.
That is to dismantle the system that makes a local government to wait for monthly allocation in order to survive as the basis of being a local government. At best, any local government or even state, if they are getting anything from the FARC, should be a form of grant or subvention, not a form of livelihood.
Government has been working out ways to create an enabling environment that will enable entrepreneurs and businesses to yield optimum results. Development partners have given a pass mark to the federal government for introducing measures aimed at curbing leakages in the economy and also strengthening the non-oil revenue receipts, taking cognizance of the potentials of the very vibrant informal sector. The federal government is also fine-tuning incentives and strategies for effective credit delivery and other financial services to the informal sector. Now, speaking in Abuja, the UNDP Country Director, Paula Minimbia, said that the informal sector is critical to the growth of Nigeria's economy and also help in reducing poverty.
In promoting the informal sector, this is based on the focus of our strategic plan in promoting inclusive and sustainable growth and development. We have also developed partnerships to help promote the growth and survival of micro enterprises in both informal and formal sectors.
Palamin also stated that activities in the informal sector can also play a crucial role in actualizing the ambition of Nigeria becoming one of the top 20 economies in the world by the year 2020.
In spite of the fact that the informal sector has been expanding rapidly in Africa and indeed other developing countries in the 21st century, its role in economic development for several countries are not fully documented. The nexus between informal sector, economic growth, and poverty have not been fully investigated. As such, governments at all levels have struggled to design the right set of policies to enhance the performance of the sector and strengthen its linkages to economic development.
President Muhammadu Buhari has indicated his administration's favorable disposition to invigorating the informal sector for job creation and sustained growth and development of the country. Now lastly, a quick look at latest figures from the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's business news this morning. Do have a blessed week ahead.
For the business package this morning. It's time now for us to review the headlines in today's newspapers.
Bayo Atoyebe sprouting from a restful weekend is right here on time. Bayo, good morning.
Thank you, Claire.
Like a restful weekend.
Yes, very restful indeed. Thank you indeed. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, let's begin our review this morning with the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian has on its front page as its lead story, the story out of Ife. That's the Kingdom of Ife. Bayo, it's obviously, I think that we have scaled the Rubicon or crossed the Rubicon, whether or not some big event, occurred last week in Ile-Ife or concerning Ile-Ife. Oh, that's the kicker for the headline. Ife indigents wait for Aregbesola to break silence. And the writer says how announcement will be made. And the Guardian has a special report on page 6. Announcement of what now? That's the question to ask, yes. And then also on the front page of the Guardian, there are business sector worries over weak economic activities, and Buhari orders resolution of audit queries in 30 days. And PDP criticizes federal government over absence of economic team. Now, these are the headlines on the front page of the Guardian. But let's just go to the inside pages. You might not be able to see the headlines. Those two headlines were taken now from page 3 of the Guardian. Two headlines from page 3 of the Guardian. NLNG yet to remit $11.6 billion to Federation accounts, says NAITI. That's the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. NLNG yet to remit $11.6 billion to Federation account, from page 3 of the Guardian. And also from page 3 of the Guardian, why appointment of Daura as DSS boss is illegal and immoral by group. Now that's also on page 3 of the Guardian. Claire.
All right, Kingsley, you talked about the lion going to the forest, whatever it's gone there to do.
The lion taking ill in the jungle.
All right, taking ill in the jungle. Yes. How long it will be there, whether it will come out, it's only the Oni fraternity that can tell us. And that's what New Telegraph is reporting on its front page. It's part one of the stories trending on its front page. Top 10 just below the masthead. Only Oni's fraternity can't see body. The details of that story you can find on page 3. Also trending there, Tambuwal to assist army. It's on page 43. And Buhari gives Auditor General 30-day deadline. It's on page 5. Now, the lead story on the front page of the New Telegraph, probe Jonathan shuns former ministers and aides. This story continues on page 2. And the picture story making the front page is President Muhammadu Buhari, his Benin Republic counterpart, Mr. Boni Yayi, as well as the Lagos State Governor, Mr. Akinomi Ambode, during the 55th independent anniversary of Benin Republic in Cotonou at the weekend. Now, trending there, military kills scores of Boko Haram fighters. Benin Republic sends 800 troops to fight insurgents. This story is on page 2. And quickly, just above the masthead, it's trending there. House lawmakers begin lobby for juicy committees. You can find that on page 5. And in Yako's firm, 236 others owe banks 49.42 billion naira, also on that page. And 3.6 trillion power investments face new threats. This is on page 25 on Business News. That's New Telegraph, Kingsley.
All right, I'm taking Vanguard as our next paper for review this morning. Vanguard on its front page has unpaid salaries as a kicker. NLC factions unite against debtor governors. Details of the story can be found on page 4. And corruption, another kicker for another headline. Buhari descends on civil servants. Details of the story can be found on page 9. And the list story, again, also has a kicker. War against money laundering. Banks and PDP kick against CBN's policy. And there are two riders to that headline. Importers divert businesses to neighboring countries, and CBN explains rationale as Naira bounces back. The composite photograph you find there on the front page of Vanguard has a caption, some of the 178 Boko Haram captives rescued by troops of the 21st Brigade of the Nigerian Army. This was along the Bama axis of Borno State. Now, those rescued include 101 children, 67 women, and 10 men. Also on the front page of Vanguard, 50 Boko Haram insurgents killed as troops repel attack on Borno village. Details of that story can be found on page 8. Claire.
All right, quickly, the lead story on the front page of the blueprint is Altrim Ministries, Agencies, and Buhari. It's a story that's trending on all the papers we have this morning. But there's a rider to that story coming in from the PDP. His imposing communist regime. You can see the story on page 6. And the picture story is that of some of the people that were rescued by the Nigerian Army from Boko Haram captivity. That's in Bama, local government area of Borno State at the weekend. You can see the Army captures Boko Haram commander, rescues 178 captives. It's also there. Now, just below the masthead, El Rufai begins demolition Wednesday. It's on page 10. And gunmen kidnap Lebanese in Niger. I'll quickly just pick out two stories from the inside page. You might not see it quickly. On page 7 of that same paper, use spiritual powers to fight Boko Haram. And this is coming from Okowa. That's the Delta State Governor. Use spiritual powers to fight Boko Haram. Please don't misconstrue this. You can just find out the details of that story on page 7. And then on page, also on the inside page, education standard. NTI wants best JAM students in College of Education. And NTI wants best JAM students in COEs. That's a story by and Kingsley. We talked about this when we were dealing with the issue of JAM results.
Well, Claire, no, unfortunately, Claire, on that day, that was last week actually, when we took on that subject, we didn't have enough time to go into the into the case of candidates who, of course, apply to either polytechnics or to colleges of education, or who, by default, will now be sent to polytechnics and colleges of education because the cutoff marks are not the same. Now, that's the argument that, look, why are you sending, as it were, persons with lower scores in JAM to colleges of education? And these are persons who are going to train or teach the future leaders, as it were. So why aren't you sending your best brains? Claire, thanks for pointing that out. But let me take the Nation newspaper very quickly. Nation newspaper has below its name flag minimum capital. That's the capital adequacy requirement. SEC, NSC, that's the stock exchange, screen capital market operators. Details on page 25. Now the list story says with a kicker revealed who is who on lists of big bank debtors. And 6 customers owe 27.91 billion naira. You can see there's a sidebar right there along with the story on the front page. Who owes what? The names are listed there, and that's according to the Nation newspaper. Also on the front page of the Nation, NNPC others get deadline on queries, and title crazy civil servants to go. And the photograph on the front page there shows President Buhari being, of course, honored in Benin Republic. And Benin to join anti-Boko Haram war with 800 troops. Details of the story can be found on page 2. Claire.
All right, and the Sun, Daily Sun, again, let's with a caption, Ex-Minister of Justice Akinjide's bombshell. Governors are biggest thieves. It's on page 5. Governors are biggest thieves. You can find that on page 5. And the picture story, Sokoto State Governor Aminu Waziri Tambuwa, with the commander Nigeria's Army's 1 Brigade Command, Sokoto Brigadier General Chikezie Ude, when the governor visited the army formation yesterday. That's the picture there. Military bombards Boko Haram. It's on page 7. PDP false regulation of domiciliary account. You can find that also on page 7. Buhari reads riot acts to public officials, also on page 8. And that saga Oshun opens up on Oni. You can find the details on page 6 and 8. But Kingsley Bayo, again, I'd like to quickly take this story from page 6. Oni is alive, says Ile-Ife chief priest. Oni is alive, says Ile-Ife chief priest.
Well, if you also recall, Claire and Bayo, last week there was one of the headlines we read in which one of the officials, palace officials, indicated that the Oni's son was going to get married. That's yesterday on Sunday, and that the Oni will be present. Now, there's a headline, page 2 of the Nation. Oni absent as son weds in Lagos. Claire.
All right.
Now, when I take, you have another
yes,
paper.
I have.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes,
go ahead.
I have the last paper, Daily Trust, and it has a lead story on the front page. Reps scramble for juicy committees. Reps scramble for juicy committees. That's the lead story. Buhari takes anti-graft war to civil service. It's on page 4. And traders panic is trending at the bottom. This story is trending at the bottom, just below that picture story. Traders panic as banks refuse dollar deposits. Traders panic as banks refuse dollar deposits. And other stories trending just below the masthead, quickly below the masthead. El-Rufai says no going back on demolition. It's on page 6. And troops rescue 101 children, 67 women in Borno, and disquiet over NNPC's 1.2 trillion upstream contract. You can find the details of that on page 28.
All right, Leadership is the last newspaper I have. Leadership below its name flag says corruption, and that's the kicker. PMB, that's President Muhammadu Buhari, beams searchlight on civil servants and gives AGF ultimatum on audit queries. AGF stands for Accountant General of the Federation. Now, Oni, that's another kicker for another headline. We are yet to receive his body. And that's according to the chief priest of the Ile-Ife. Details of that story can be found on page 8. Well, you know, by all the conflicting headlines, but I think there's some certainty now as to what they have happened, or what has happened, rather. Now, the lead story of Leadership, middle of the page, Nigerians spend 212 billion naira on monthly phone calls, and there are 146 million active subscribers. Also on the front page there is a photograph of President Muhammadu Buhari being decorated by the wife of the President of Benin Republic. That's Mrs. Yaye. And Dangote Cement declares 121.8 billion naira half-year profit. These are the front pages from Leadership newspaper by RTAB.
Thank you, Kingsley. Well, in spite of all the conflicting reports, unless and until the Traditional Council formally notifies Governor of Osun State and he formally makes an announcement about the demise of the Oni, the position to be assumed as the chief's advice is that the Oni is still alive. However, even within the palace circles, there have now been reports coming indicating that they have not received the body. The indication of the body also gives another signal. And already, residents in the ancient city are already gathering and preparing for the rituals that will follow, because usually there will be closure of markets, and for days they may not get access to foodstuffs, and therefore they are preparing for the inevitable.
There was also an Oro festival, and that's
yes.
Oro, and
Oro
women were said, to have
usually
gone into
festival,
hiding.
Women are not allowed to see the Oro, but the festivals went on because they wanted to assume that things were going on naturally, and that was the Oro festival came when it was appropriately scheduled. In the insurgency front, troops of the 121 Brigade and 151 Task Force of the Army have cleared insurgents out of their Bama axis, and in the process rescued 178 captives, including 101 children, 67 women, and 10 men. A Boko Haram commander who was not named is reported to have been captured. Also, troops repelled insurgents in a raid at Bita near Goza. There, 50 of the insurgents were reported killed. This has been attained with area support from the Air Force that have provided reconnaissance along the road through Hambadaga, Dure, and Pulka area. But meanwhile, the insurgents were also reported to have attacked Malari village. They were punishing the villagers for providing information to security operatives. They evaded the village when soldiers who usually are on patrol in the area were probably not within the vicinity. They were reported to have killed 13 persons and razed down some of the villages. Meanwhile, some papers are reporting that some senators are to accompany the Senate president to visit the war zones anytime from now. Meanwhile, President Muhammad Buhari returned from his one-day visit to Benin Republic. It was a dual occasion, one for completing the leg round, the shuttle diplomacy and consultation with the Lake Chad Basin Commission to foster forces against the insurgency, and secondly, to be part of the 55 years anniversary of the celebration of Benin Republic. President Muhammad Buhari told a meeting of Nigerians residing in Benin Republic that 2 consulates will be reopened in Benin Republic after consultation and directives to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The President enjoined Nigerians resident in Benin Republic to be very careful with the laws and the culture of the people and abide by them. He cited his concern about so many Nigerians, for instance, in South Africa, that have been caught on the wrong side of the law, and they called them to be good guests in Benin Republic. Meanwhile, President Thomas Boni of Benin Republic has increased his nation's troops to the Lake Chad Basin Committee multinational joint task force. Initially, he had pledged 250 troops. He has increased it now to 800. The troop population for the multinational joint force will increase from 8,700 to 9,250. The war against corruption has been focused on the public service, with the president giving directives that all outstanding audit queries that have piled up over the years must be responded to within 30 days. The Special Assistant to President of Media and Publicity, Malam Garba Shehu, says that the era of impunity is gone and the president is taking the war of corruption to the civil service. The president wants all firm action taken against violators of extant financial regulations. The ministries, departments, and agencies are required to submit financial statements and audit reports of the Federation to the Auditor General of the Federation. If the Attorney General is dissatisfied, he issues queries. Such queries can be helpful to check fraud and other underhand dealings. Over time, there have been an avalanche of such queries that have not been responded to. Meanwhile, today marks the deadline given by the central bank to banks to publish and shame a strategy that is meant to reveal outstanding debtors to the banks. Banks are to carry out the threat. Union Bank, for instance, is said to be owed by 176 debtors, with 6 of them owing 27.91 billion naira. Fidelity Bank has 28 customers with such defaulting loans. Some debtors are reported by the Nation newspaper to have entered various payment schemes to avoid being shamed. The debtors are to be blacklisted and prohibited from foreign exchange transactions, as well as being prohibited from government trading in government securities. Some debtors have already made long-term arrangements for part payments and rescheduling of payments over a long time. Earlier on, Kingsley, you read the report about Nigerians talking away in some quantum of billions.
That's correct. Per month.
Yes. They say there are 146 million active subscribers of telephone services. And giving this figure, 212 billion naira is spent by Nigerians monthly on phone calls. The findings was arrived by a leadership investigation that used the average monthly revenue per user, ARPD, which is put at $6 per caller. They use the exchange rate of 242, but at this morning, it is said that the dollar has appreciated and come.
Sorry, the naira has appreciated against the dollar.
Against the dollar and come to about 218. It was reported, and therefore it is said that about 146 million subscribers in Nigeria at the month of May may be spending as much as 202 billion talking. Finally, football. There is a mixed grill in the football qualifying matches that Nigeria played over the weekend. Nigeria under 23 team qualified with holding Congo to a goalless draw. Having won the first leg by 2-1, the Dream Team 6 has qualified for a berth in the African Under 20 Championship coming up Senegal 2015. However, the Super Falcons were not that lucky. Claire, they failed to qualify for a berth for the 2016 Olympic coming up Rio in Brazil. The Falcons lost to Equatorial Guinea 2-1 in the second leg. You will recall that the first leg was played in Abuja National Stadium and it ended in a draw. The Nzalaga National, that is the name of the female team for Equatorial Guinea, have now qualified by 3-2 aggregate, and they will be one of the representatives for Africa in Rio Olympic football.
All right, Baya Toyobe, just to also ride on that with regard to soccer, for the first time, Arsene Wenger, the manager of Arsenal, silenced Mourinho, the manager of Chelsea, the community.
He only succeeded in breaking a jinx, but I think our football, the charity of our football,
begins. That's you've dealt with that already, but that's also interesting because we have Nigerians, who are keen. Dangote has been seeking to purchase Arsenal, for a while.
Well,
so
there's a silver lining in that. If you succeed in buying Arsenal, there is a very great opportunity to have a feeder team from Nigeria which will work with the Arsenal team, and they will be able to help improve our football. That, I think, is a silver lining.
That's right. So that's the way Arsenal started last season, FA Cup and the Community Shield, and this year they've done the same thing. Bayo Atoibi, we'd like to thank you for being with us on the review segment of Newspapers this morning.
Thank you for having me.
See you tomorrow. All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. Our principal topic for conversation this morning is oil theft and what can be done about it.
There is no point to give some people licenses to go to world market and buy products and bring to Nigeria. And even the swapping is done in such a dishonest way that Nigeria was consistently losing on daily basis millions of dollars. I think the people who have been operating on the industry, a lot of them that took the decision, they display such a lack of conscience and patriotism. And only God knows the amount of damage meted on Nigeria.
All right. Now, it has virtually become a cycle of blame trading and buck passing as the years roll by and the question of oil theft in Nigeria remains unanswered. The magnitude of the problem is not just a source of worry to government, but threatens the country's ability to meet social and other development objectives. In this background report, Nnamdi Odipo attempts to give perspective to the issue of oil theft in Nigeria and its impact on the economy.
Crude oil, the main chunk of Nigeria's revenue generation, and has been since the 70s. And in spite of the recent dwindling price of oil in the international market, the country continues to substantially depend on the sale of crude, legally that is, while it suffers significant losses from illegal crude sales and oil theft. The subject of oil theft has been on the table of national discourse for years, with pundits describing the development at some point as an unending war and seemingly unwinnable. This perhaps derives from the fact that the nefarious practice has indeed lingered for years, resulting in huge financial losses for a country in dire need of the monetary resources that would have accrued from legal sales. The relevant authorities have often attempted to paint a picture of just how terrible the situation is. The Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NEITI, said Nigeria lost a total sum of $10.9 billion to oil theft from 2009 to 2011. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, admitted that last year alone, Nigeria lost between 33 million naira and 100 million naira to pirates. The NNPC puts the nation's loss to about $12 billion annually. An international oil and gas website, theoilprice.com, had in a recent publication described Nigeria as the country with the highest incidence of crude oil theft in the world. They claimed that with as much as 400,000 barrels of crude oil stolen daily, Nigeria tops countries like Mexico, Iraq, Russia and Indonesia, who are among the top 5 countries most plagued. It puts Nigeria's losses to crude theft at $1.7 billion, about 272 billion naira per month. In Nigeria, oil theft is a nefarious commercial craft associated with criminal gangs, militants tapping crude from pipelines for local refining, while the large quantities of stolen crude leaves Nigeria's shores to foreign countries where it is sold illegally. A closer evaluation of the situation showed that beyond pipeline vandalization, several methods are adopted to cut away crude oil and dispose of at high sea. And experts say going by the sophistication and the paraphernalia required to engage in the legal trade, it is possible that oil bunkering may be perpetuated by highly placed individuals with some international business clouds and machineries to embark on the illicit art. But then, just who are these individuals? That is the question that resonates in the minds of many in the country as the nefarious activity continues to pose a major challenge to Nigeria's economic fortune.
Thank you very much there for that background. Well, joining us now to discuss this problematic issue, we'd first like to welcome Rear Admiral Obiora Charles Medani. He's Chief of Training and Operations at the Naval Headquarters. Rear Admiral, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, also at this time, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. That's NEITI. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. All right, and in our Lagos Network studio, we'll have joined us 2 people there. First, I'll quickly introduce Mr. Emeka Ene. He is Chairman of Society of Petroleum Engineers and Chief Executive Officer of All Data Energy Group. Mr. Ene, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And also joined us from Lagos is Mr. Bala Zaka. Mr. Bala Zaka is a familiar face, he's a petroleum engineer and, of course, a chartered accountant. Mr. Bala Zaka, good to see you again.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this conversation from our Abuja studios. Earlier I introduced the Executive Secretary of NEITI. And NEITI, of course, has always brought to the limelight the underhand dealings in the oil industry, with particular reference to crude oil theft. Now, the Executive Secretary, Mrs. Zainab, what is happening with regard to crude oil theft? It appears to be something that's going on an industrial scale.
Well, thank you very much. Crude oil theft, as has been introduced earlier, refers to activities of theft of crude oil or vandalization of facilities. And what we've done in NEITI in our reporting process was to try to report an aspect of the crude oil theft to call attention to the problem. And in doing that, we limited our reporting process to information that we gathered from 3 operators, joint venture operators that operate in the land and swampy areas of the Niger Delta. We got information from Shell, NAWOC, and Chevron.
Okay, well, thanks, Claire. I think we'll go over to Lagos. Before we come to the naval chief, let's have an appreciation from Mr. Engineer Emeka Ene. Engineer Emeka Ene, we once had you on this program several months ago, but we had not able to deal with the issue of oil theft in greater detail. And today we're examining the issue. You are a player in the industry, and certainly you have an idea and you are concerned about what's going on. What, in your opinion, is the magnitude of the problem, and how does it manifest?
I think the problem cuts right across the whole value chain. And what I mean by value chain, we need to think about it and picture an environment where you have fishermen, you have women who are working in the creeks and in the swamps and who have their way of life essentially transformed into an economic system. I call it an economic system now that starts right at the pipelines and extends all the way to illegal oil markets. So it is a serious concern. Now it has created a culture of violence. It has created a culture of just demanding and taking, and therefore it actually has damaged the fabric of the society where all this activity takes place. And we have to recognize that in trying to deal with the issue, it also impacts all the collateral activity that takes place in the area. So oil theft is not just a reduction in revenue issue. It is a cycle that has essentially created a shift in the GDP of the Niger Delta, and therefore it makes it very difficult to solve. It affects the service companies who have the ability to do work impaired. It impacts the oil companies who cannot predict or plan their work. It in fact impacts the infrastructure, which gets damaged, and of course going to take a lot of time and effort to correct it. Above all, it impacts the environment in a very serious way. It degrades the environment critically and damages the ecosystem, and ultimately it impacts the revenues that the country enjoys. So the economic impact cuts right across beyond the Niger Delta and impacts the whole country.
Mr. Ene, thank you for your perspective. Let me quickly take Mr. Bala Zaka. Mr. Bala Zaka, let's put oil theft into proper context and perspective. Many people attribute it to largely pipeline vandalism. And if you recall, the last administration had to even engage the services of ex-militants to police the pipelines. But 2013, 2014, we saw massive scale of crude oil theft. So how much of this theft is going on, both offshore, I mean, in our waterways, as well as, attributed to pipeline vandalism? What's the scale of the oil theft?
I mean, it can be explained to the layman's language. You see, first of all, criminality against national assets is a demonstration of disloyalty to a country. Criminals that are involved in crude oil theft or destruction of national assets have no respect for their countries. They are economic traitors. They are economic betrayers, and you can best describe them as economic vampires. And when you now situate that, especially on crude oil theft, this is the way you explain it so that you can get everybody to be a stakeholder, from the community people to even those who act as agents of national economy destruction. A typical example is this, like you rightly explained. Within the last dispensation, we were made to understand that we were losing an average of 400,000 barrels per day to criminality. A lot of people think 400,000 barrels is probably like just 4 drums, but this is the way to explain it and educate Nigerians and even the criminals. 400,000 barrels, if you multiply it by 42, that will convert it to gallons. That's 16.8 million gallons. If you multiply that value again by 4, you will convert it to liters. And that will give you 67.2 million liters of crude oil being lost per day. By the time you divide that by the capacity of a tanker, which is 33,000 liters, that will give you 2,000 tankers per day. And that simply means Nigeria was losing an average of 2,000 tankers of crude oil per day. And if you want to explain it further, either of two things must have been happening. If the control lines were showing that we were losing that equivalent of 2,000 tankers per day, I can tell you it has nothing to do with the petty thieves. It was a well-crafted and syndicated business, and that quantity was being bunkered. But if something like that was not happening, then that figure was bandied on the face of Nigerians, and some criminal elements, probably economic traitors and bad lieutenants, were stealing that equivalent amount. By the time we start discussing the solutions, you will discover that everybody needs to be a stakeholder. It has effect on the first community of impact, that is the environment or community of impact. It has effect on the investor, and it has effect on the government, in that case, the national economy.
Mr. Balazaka, for your explanation, down to earth. I'm sure I also, I'm surprised at the 2,000 tankers, Kingsley, of crude.
If it were to be refined, there are many derivatives to be sourced that can be sourced from crude. Well, this is just crude, but that's we'll come to greater detail of that. Let's Claire,
back to Admiral Charles Medani. This is obviously you heard Mr. Zaka there. A lot goes on in the deep sea than we thought. Do you agree with that?
Well, I have to be careful with figures because most of the time a lot of figures are being given out to the public. We in the Navy, we rely on the industry figure. From our records, in 2014, a total of 13,018,430 barrels was lost to theft. That is in the whole of 2014. But there seems to be a problem that sometimes people mix up what in the industry is called deferred production and stolen crude. I will just draw a line on the two. Now, deferred production is crude that could have been produced, but is not being produced because of security-related issues.
Force majeure.
Things like people going to kidnap oil workers, breaking pipelines, and what have you, which they say is a loss of revenue to government. But the crude is not stolen. The crude is still on the ground, but it's not being converted to money. And by our own figures, we have, again, based on industry figures, the Navy doesn't generate these figures. Deferred production alone was 61,991,219 barrels in 2014. Now, if you put the two, it's a lot of money that is not coming to government. And, but the good news is these are holistic figures. They do not tell you the breakdown. For example, in the Navy itself has been able to bring the figure down. In January 2014, this loss alone was 2,172,341. But as of December, that is what is being lost to theft, had come down to 474,316 barrels. So some progress have been made. But when you put it in quantum, of course, 13 million barrels of crude oil is a lot of money.
It's alarming, yes.
And then 61 million, almost 62 million that is not produced is a lot of money.
Well, Rear Admiral, how does stolen crude, or how does crude get stolen? From the point of view of the Navy?
Well, theft, there are a lot of factors involved. But let me address your question, how does it get stolen? Well, it gets stolen when a person who is not authorized to export crude does export crude. That is theft. A person who is not supposed to have access to crude is theft. Now, how does it happen? It happens in many ways. The ones that security related, I can tell you. One, there are people who go to wellheads and break these wellheads and then put them in barges and, of course, sell them to ships that come to take them. That's one area. There are those who, there are valves where this crude, when it's being pumped, people who rig a hose to them, connect them to barges or to waiting ships, and then siphon those ones. And then there is allegedly, I use that word with reservation, it's alleged, there are those that at loading stations, which is official. In other words, ships that come and officially are nominated to load crude, load more than what is allocated to them. That is also part of it. They call it topping. So if in totality of this is how it takes place. Now, why does this happen? There are three reasons. First, I think one of the gentlemen that in Lagos you just mentioned talked about dislocation in the communities. When you have dislocation in the communities, certainly you breed some problems. If people cannot earn a living from their environment anymore, the devil provides work for the idle hand. That's one issue. Then there is what you also call inadequate government presence, which should deter would-be criminals. So where you don't have enough law enforcement in the community, of course it becomes attractive for people to do what they want to do. And then you have connivance within the industry, because some of the things that go on cannot go on if you don't have knowledge about that particular industry. So a totality of this, I think, will answer your question.
Okay, but Claire, we will have to return to the Rear Admiral because it's raised a number of it's raised a number of points, yes, that I think Nigerians would like to be addressed in the course of this conversation.
Definitely. Yes. I just like Kingsley, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, to also, talk about this issue. How does crude oil get stolen? Your responsibility, part of your responsibility is also to look at the problems, how does it happen, where does it happen, and of course what can we do about it? Now Rear Admiral Medani here has given us 3 areas of how crude can be stolen, but let me just put it down in our understanding. Well, oil could be stolen by, well, as we know, through pipeline vandalism, through declaration of force majeure that some produced oil, as well as through unremitted revenues, through oil swap. These methods, these 3 areas, require sophistication and high tech to be able to do this. It's not just an activity of mere criminals, Mrs. Ahmed.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very organized process. The level of threat we are talking about is very large. Pipeline vandalization is petty thievery, mostly on land. But the theft that goes on off land involves large tankers that come and park in our waterways for up to 7 days. And you have small vessels moving from the areas where the theft is and loading these tankers. And yet these things... Yes, and these things continue to happen. A large vessel is not something you miss. It's not something you cannot see. So we need to look at how we can deploy technology to identify which tankers are supposed to be legally loading and which ones are not. And the factors to me that are responsible for this continuing to happen is locally we have a thriving black market, but also internationally there are foreign buyers that there is a large demand for stolen crude oil. And this means that the solutions that we have to be looking at has to involve multiple stakeholders. It has to involve the oil producing companies, the security agencies, of course, and other government agencies that are concerned, but the communities also need to be involved because they see these things happening, they're part of it, they're involved in it. Apart from creating awareness, we need to also have an enabling legislation, a legislation that will impose steep penalties as consequences for this theft continue to happen. Maybe we should put in place special courts and ensure that there is swift prosecution of offenders as well as their backers. We also need to track the financial flows. Where is this money going to? How is this process sponsored? We need to exchange this information between all the agencies that are responsible, but also with the international community. We need to look at the possibility of using technology to fingerprint our crude oil. Of course, this is also with the support of the international community so that refineries around the world will reject the oil, crude oil when it is supplied. And also, we need to look at how the Navy and other security agencies can be better equipped. Maybe they need to consider looking at using unmanned aerial vehicles, and as well as to monitor the systems. And then we need to look at putting in place pipeline integrity systems so that the moment a pipeline is busted, it is identified quickly. That will minimize the degradation that has already happened to our environment.
All right, yeah, Mrs. Ahmed, as it were, you're on fast forward, going ahead to prescribe. One of the roles of your agency is to, as it were, track issues of production in our oil sector, as well as the reporting of production. Some persons hold the view that Nigeria, as it were, is unfortunately often unaware of how much crude it produces, how much exact crude it produces, and even if it knows how much crude it produces, it's also unaware of how much crude it actually exports. So what have you found in this chain? Do we know how much crude we produce at any point in time? And do we know how much crude leaves our shores, by way of export?
Over the years, NITI has been reporting on how much crude oil is produced. But we obtain that information at the point at which crude oil is loaded on vessels for export. We are not able to get information on what is produced at the wellhead and what is processed at the flow stations and what even goes into the terminals. So as a country, we are not able to accurately report on how much crude oil is produced. What we have been reporting is simply what is exported, and that means we are not able to adequately track what is lost or what is stolen. What we've done in NITI was an attempt to report on just the theft that takes place in the land and swampy areas, and over a 4-year period, we reported 160 million barrels of crude oil lost, and that's a lot of money. It was valued at $13.7 billion US. Imagine what that will do to our country in the form of development of infrastructure, social amenities, and so on. We continue to attempt to find ways to report this process. We obtain information from the companies, from Shell, from NAOC, from Chevron. The Rear Admiral said the industry provides the figures, but even the industry is providing the figures based on some calculations and back assessment that they do. It's still not accurate. So we need to address the issue of metering as one of the solutions to the crude oil theft. Because what you measure, you will now be able to know accurately how to address it if you're able to measure it well.
All right, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, thank you very much for your reaction. We'll come back to you in the course of this discussion. Let's go back again now to Lagos. Engineer Meka, we heard you speak here. Of course, you're the chairman of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. For the benefit of our viewers, I think it may be useful to also clarify some concepts. Now, every time you hear something about illegal bunkering, illegal bunkering, of course, suggests that there's illegal bunkering. So in terms of conceptual clarification, what is bunkering? What is illegal bunkering? Is illegal bunkering also crude oil theft? And where then do you have the mix that legal bunkering now translates into illegal bunkering and therefore crude oil theft?
Well, you know, the thing about bunkering is the transfer of crude products either by supplying petroleum products essentially to an oil facility or to a production platform or to a drilling rig point is legal if you're transferring petroleum products. Now, crude oil bunkering essentially officially, if you are going to do a virtual pipeline, either by moving crude from one point to another where the physical pipeline doesn't exist, it's legal if it's metered at both ends and, of course, with all the permits, and there's no problem about that. Now, illegal bunkering has now emerged as a word to kind of mirror that same process purely outside the realms of the law. Now, recognize that ultimately this thing starts at a pipeline, a hot tap into a pipeline, or a wellhead, or a storage tank. Wherever it happens illegally, where individuals set up a system of evacuation of crude illegally, that in itself is illegal bunkering, either in a barge or in a truck on land or in a boat in drums. All of that is illegal. But you see, one thing that we need to recognize here, which is in trying to get to the root cause, is that an illegal economic system is emerging. We might begin to think that these are just a bunch of criminals that are engaged in this activity. But you recognize that now, probably at the community level, you have women, children, men engaged in this illegal economic activity. And if you think that the average GDP is $1,200 per capita in Nigeria, in the creeks, it's probably as much as $8 per capita, because they see this now as the source of income, because I mean, fishing is not even a viable business anymore. So illegal bunkering is not just the activity of moving crude oil illegally from one point to another. It's actually an illegal economic system that probably we need to think about this as a complex problem that requires a complex solution. The SPE, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, tries to use best practices and knowledge sharing right across the industry, because remember that we have many companies engaged in this activity almost independent of each other. And therefore, the SPE, being the largest engineering organization in the oil industry in Nigeria, try to use that platform to create best practices. And I'm glad that technology was mentioned here, that the deployment of technology right from the wellhead to the tank will help in creating transparency, and ultimately transparency helps to build the trust, not just from the community level, but all the way to the loading bay. And that's very, very critical, that knowledge, with technology and an engagement at the grassroots are critical if this process is just not going to unravel beyond what we currently have to deal with. Recognize that back around 2006, 2007, the oil pipeline vandalization was at the peak of the Niger Delta crisis. It came down after amnesty, but last year it was back up to even at higher levels than what it was previously. So we need to recognize that this cycle is not just criminals bunkering oil, but it is an economic system that is emerging that we need to nip in the bud.
Back to Mr. Bala Isaka. Mr. Bala, we've been able to point out 3, 4, or even more methods by which crude oil is siphoned or stolen from this country to elsewhere. Now, if you recall, this administration, quite recently took 2 measures. First, the banning of over 100 light vessels, from coming into our waters, and then ordering an investigation into the oil swap deal, maybe probably to check, siphoning of crude, via those areas. Do they really have a link? If we look at the oil swap deal, if we look at the number of light vessels operating on our waters, is there any link?
No, when we talk about crude oil theft, we started by just coming up with the general analysis. Now we need to explain the implications and then come up with the solutions. The reason why crude oil theft thrives in Nigeria is purely simple. The control mechanisms are not working, or they are not effective. And when you talk about control mechanisms or safeguard, you talk about three things. You have preventive mechanisms, detective mechanism, and corrective mechanisms. Preventive mechanism simply means I should have controls in place to be able to prevent the criminals from even attempting what they want to attempt. If my preventive mechanisms fail, I should be able to have detective mechanisms. I couldn't prevent you from attempting, but I should be able to have safeguards to detect you at the point of carrying out the criminality. Then if the detective fail, by the time you create that impact, I should be able to have corrective mechanism. So we have situations where preventive safeguards have failed or are not effective. Detective have failed or are not effective, and corrective have failed or are not effective. And this is the implication. Most people go for crude oil and they break this pipe. So if they go, sometimes the crude oil will be there, it may not be there, they will just find gas. But what people don't understand, all they do is break, and break. So you go looking for crude oil, which you can hold, which is something that is tangible. You can't see it. The next thing is you break and you see gas. Gas is compressible fluid. You can't hold it. But what they don't even know about the gas is Nigeria is more of a gas nation than an oil nation. Our proved reserve of gas is 187 trillion cubic feet. But potentially, Nigeria has 600 trillion cubic feet of gas. And when you talk about two key sectors of the economy, you're talking about gas. If you talk about agric, we're talking about diversification. The raw material to improve our soil chemistry is to improve our soil chemistry, you go in with fertilizer. The raw material for fertilizer is sand and gas. You can see the relevance. Before we unbundle NEPA, everything was predicated on the availability of gas for the GENCOs, so that the DISCOs will have to distribute. So if you have electricity, there will be glut at the filling station. And when there is glut at the filling station, I tell you, then prices of refined products will come down. Because a greater part, from my analysis and research, 75% of the refined products we buy at the filling stations are actually being bought to run generators, not automobiles. So you can see, if we can even just harness our gas and up our electricity, there will be glut at the filling station. If we want to divest and do something about agriculture, we still need that gas. So whenever we talk about crude oil, we shouldn't forget the gas, because Nigeria is more of a gas nation than an oil nation. And when we start talking about the solutions in the course of this discussion, I tell you, you need to do something about the environment or community that is vulnerable to the first impact. By the time we finish analyzing and educating them, you will notice that it's going to be very easy to lock up this economy and fix up the Nigerian oil and gas industry.
Mr. Zaka, thank you very much there for your reaction. I just wanted to say that's to keep this on the table for the benefit of the other guests who may wish to take their cue from that. You've talked about preventive measures, detective measures, as well as corrective measures. And is the apparent failure or the actual failure in these sets of measures that has occasioned the phenomenon that we are discussing this morning? We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation, but to return to Rear Admiral Medani. Rear Admiral, while Mrs. Zainab Ahmed was responding to one of our questions, I mean, she did say, and this is a matter that has often been reported in the media anyway, that ships berth and, they take our crude and they disappear. Barges, go out, they sail, and that at some point anyway, you have ships that are just on Nigeria's coastline, waiting, to obtain the stolen crude. Oftentimes, this will amount to an indictment of the Navy. But what is the situation? What have you seen? Is the story as reported, is it true or is it exaggerated?
Okay, thank you so much. I think also, again, there's some exaggeration. I gave you some figures now that shows that in 2014, and these are concrete figures, that we moved from losing 2,172,341 barrels in January, and it came down to 474,000 in December. How was this achieved? It's simple. The Navy made it impossible for ships to come and take crude from Nigeria. That is what brought down the figure. And then, if you notice that within the same period, you had a lot of illegal refineries emerging in the Niger Delta. They are related. Yeah, because it's no longer possible for those who siphon crude in barges to go and take them to ships waiting offshore. So rather than losing the money, they decided to start refining them locally. That became another problem. So in 2014, the Navy arrested 90 tankers. And these are things that are visible for anybody to see.
Sorry, Rear Admiral, when you say tankers, like we're discussing, crude oil. Yeah. Is it oil tankers or fuel tankers as we see them carrying 33,000 liters?
No, the Navy doesn't operate on land.
That's right.
So any figure I mentioned is something to do with water. You have to also realize that this thing does not just happen only on water. Most of the crude we are talking of is on land, but they are taken by barges to waiting ships, vessels, which is what the Navy has been able to sort of choke up. I'm very glad Ms. Zainab mentioned issue of resources. There are over 6,000 creeks in the Niger Delta. The Navy require a lot of resources to deal with this. Of course, you and I know that investment in the Navy has been weak since the last time the Navy was recapitalized was in the 70s. So most ships that the Navy is operating with now will be 30, 35 years. And the lifespan of a ship internationally is 30, 35 years. So you could see that virtually all our vessels are at the end. And then the peculiarity of the terrain in the Niger Delta require what we call patrol boats, flat-bottom boats, boats that will be able to go to the creeks, because a ship cannot just go anywhere. A ship is constrained by her drought. Now, do we have enough of those vessels to be able to maintain a dominant presence? The answer is no. We don't have enough for that. And to invest in the Navy is a capital project. It is like railway. So, please just, if you allow me this thing.
I'd just like to answer this question. Might the Navy then be overwhelmed by what is happening?
I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but to say the resources. I have just given you a success that I've been able to.
You're inevitably overwhelmed if you don't have these resources.
No, if you say overwhelmed, that means we've lost. We haven't, because as it is, if we've been able to cut down from 2 million to 400,000, that means we are doing something. But we could do better. The key thing is, if you look at the quantum of what is being lost and the investment needed to be made to recapitalize the Navy, you will see that it is better to recapitalize the Navy to reduce this loss. Just 10% or 20% of the value of what we are losing, if put into resourcing the Navy, we have a dramatic impact. And I would like to also please bring this to your attention and to your viewers, that worldwide practice, worldwide international practices, is that 30% of the value of a ship is budgeted annually for its maintenance and operation. The conservative estimate of our holding, the assets the Navy has, at when dollar was at a favorable rate, was almost at about 306 billion. That means for operating costs for the Navy alone, you will need roughly 92 billion. Okay, but we've not been getting this. Please let me, because it's important that Nigerians know this. We've not been getting this. And yet, with the resources that is available, we've been able to do this much. Imagine what will happen if that investment is made. Of course, I understand the economy is not in a very good shape, but it's like you build a house and you don't invest in it. Eventually, when you are going to renovate that house, you pay more, or you may need to demolish the house.
That's right. Okay. What's clear? Before you, I don't know, you have a question for Mrs. Zainab, the Executive Secretary of NATI. Rear Admiral made a point that last year, or thereabout, I'm not quite sure, I don't quite remember 2014, that you arrested some 90
vessels.
90 vessels. What happened to those vessels that were arrested?
Unfortunately, the Navy is not a prosecuting agency. The procedure is the Navy arrests and hands over to the police, the EFCC, the civil defense. They are the prosecuting agency. And of course, the people go to court. In fact, it's a big problem because most of these vessels, the prosecuting agencies don't have the capacity to keep them. So the limited space we have to put our own ships is occupied by vessels we've arrested. And these vessels are made of steel. If you leave a vessel in water for some time, the steel will rust. Water will go in. Trying to salvage them becomes another cost on the Navy.
So what do? You let the vessels go?
No, we don't.
You lose the evidence?
No, we don't. That is part of the problem. We don't. We have to keep men on board. Even vessels we have already handed over to other prosecuting agencies. Yes. And it costs money to maintain those men on board those ships. It costs money to run the machineries of those ships so that they don't wither away. All these are not things that are budgeted to the Navy, and it is the little money the Navy has to manage for its operation that is invested in this.
Kingsley, and Rear Admiral will not agree that the Navy is overwhelmed by what is happening. But let me get to Mrs. Zainab Ahmed. I'd like you to speak to the issue, to the question I asked earlier on. I said this present administration has taken two very important measures. The first one, it banned very large crude carrying vessels on our waters, over I think 113 it's reported, and secondly it has asked investigation into the oil swap deals. Now many people are inferring that this points to a link with the loss of crude oil. What do you think about that? And secondly, do you think that the agencies, charged with the responsibility of checking crude oil theft, are they overwhelmed?
Well, thank you very much. I think the government actually took the right decision by banning some vessels from coming into Nigeria. And I guess the reason for doing that is for the government to be able to identify the vessels that are coming illegally and the vessels that are permitted to come in legally into the country. So I think it's a right step. During the reporting work of NATI, we have not found any link between crude oil swaps and oil theft. Crude oil swap is one of the measures that NNPC takes to provide fuel for use locally. And what they do is from the domestic crude oil that is allocated to it, they take a portion of it and send it to maybe neighboring refineries like Sierra Leone or Ivory Coast. And that is, the crude oil is processed and products are sent, or simply they give crude oil and we take back refined products. We have not found that link, but it's an interesting question. We will look at it as we are currently running another audit. We will look at it and see and investigate to see if there is any such link. The Navy might be doing its best, but we really feel that they need to be better resourced. If vessels have been arrested and then Navy men that are supposed to be manning the waters are busy just guarding those seized vessels, it speaks to the point that I made earlier on, that we must have in place a special law, special courts, to make sure that when these cases arise, that they're treated with speed, so that they are dispensed with, and whoever needs to be prosecuted is prosecuted timely, and the backers of these thieves are also prosecuted. So it is to my mind that even though the Navy is doing what it can, that it is not yet adequately resourced, and we need to look at how to improve on the equipments of the Navy and how to better resource them so that they can police our waters more effectively.
Well, Mrs. Zainab, thank you. Just before we come back to you almost immediately, I would like this question to be taken by Engineer Emeka. It's at Lagos Network Center. Engineer, you listened to the Rear Admiral, and we did indicate some of the challenges that the Navy is facing. And of course, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed has just spoken also to the need to get the Navy better resource. Now, are stakeholders in the oil industry concerned about the thievery going on? And if so, in what ways might they contribute to the security of products, assuming they are so concerned?
It's not just concern, it's a critical concern. Because you're looking at an industry where the investment into oil, the cycle of investment, exploitation, and production is like a 10-year cycle. It's not, you don't invest and produce tomorrow. So you project your economics over a 10, 20, 30-year period. And now if you're putting an investment in infrastructure, pipelines, pump stations, flow stations, all the production facilities, in an environment, in an ecosystem where you don't want to have it damaged, you want to keep it in a virgin territory, you're obviously going to be very concerned if this kind of activity begins to take off in the wrong direction. Now, oil companies can actually help solve the problem if the industry is transparent. You know, I mentioned that incidents went all the way down from 2006, 2007 after the amnesty program. You could interpret that to mean that there was a level of trust that was built in. Solutions where there was a level of expectation that there would be a kind of solution to this problem. Now you ask yourself, why did it all suddenly jump up? Has that trust been degraded? You see, when we talk about resourcing and resourcing, with 6,000 creeks and all the wide expanse of Nigerian waters, it is probably impossible to adequately resource to cover this area. So we have to resource in a very smart way. And one of the key ways to resource smartly is obviously intelligence. And you can build intelligence on the basis of data, knowledge. In other words, if you do a map, if you do a map of the Niger Delta, and you integrate all that is going on in terms of what is pumped and what is taken, you can identify the hotspots, right? There are obvious hotspots, and you create a system that addresses these hotspots. So this is where oil companies, oil service companies can come in. Now, if you have ownership, and I don't want us to go into a solution mode simply by saying we have a problem, we have a big problem, we have all these issues, don't have the resources, then wherein lies the solution? We have a lot of low-hanging fruits, and one of the key low-hanging fruits is the fact that we do know that if we share information, if we share knowledge on where these things are taking place, if we take it from end to end, from flow station, from wellhead, all the way to the tank, and we can track it, we can share knowledge across the industry, not just Shell providing their data, Chevron providing the data, ADI providing data, but we have it all integrated, probably as close as possible to real time. Then the Navy would know where there's a problem way ahead of time. It is even possible to predict where the next incident is going to happen, because you're using data analytics to compare and to do all of these things. This is what the industry is good at, handling big data. And the reason why I think that we are probably at the edge of a solution is that sharing that data, particularly when government is engaged, right at the top. The leadership is engaged right at the top to create an atmosphere of transparency. And this is where I think the issue of the the oil swaps come in. The fact is that we need to unbundle all the different components of the industry in such a way that it is transparent. And if it is transparent, then you know what you pump and what you receive, there's a match. And if there's a mismatch, everybody comes together to say, where is this mismatch happening? What can we do to solve the problem? So, I mean, it's a complex problem. It has to have a complex solution.
Engineer Ene, thank you very much there once again. And that question, of course, I would like Mrs. Zainab Ahmed to take it up. You listen to Engineer Ene talk about the need for greater transparency, which of course speaks to one of the issues that your agency is required to handle. Can we really attain the level of transparency and inter-stakeholder cooperation that Mr. Engineer Ene has articulated?
It is possible. And not only is it possible, but it's something we must do if we are actually going to reform the oil and gas industry in our country. We should start by ensuring that measurements are done adequately, and therefore everybody knows what is produced and what moves from the point of production right up to the point of export. We should also be more transparent in how the domestic crude oil is managed by the National Oil Company, that is to say the NNPC. The crude oil swaps that was mentioned earlier on, we didn't find a link with theft, but we did say that it is not a transparent process and it is a very cost-inefficient process, and we should look at dispensing with it as quickly as possible. When you don't have correct information and you take decisions based on just some assumptions, then the decisions that you take, they're not likely going to address the problem. We need to, all of us from the industry, the government, the communities, the security agencies, we need to make a very good effort at tracking and providing and exchanging information so that we have a chance to address, target our limited resources to where the problem is like the Rear Admiral said, to the flashpoints. We need to target all our resources to where it will be most useful. And to be able to do that effectively, we need to share information, and the information needs to be credible.
All right, sharing information, credible information. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, Executive Secretary, Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NEITI. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. The rest of our guests are also here with us. Mr. Balazaka in Lagos, Mr. Emeka Ene also in Lagos, and we still have the Rear Admiral Charles Obiora Medani also with us. We'll be right back.
It's the big 60th anniversary Rich for Millions promo where everybody wins. Hurry, just buy any pig milk. Check the BN code. Text the code starting with BN on the pack to 55331. Win daily cash prizes of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, and an amazing 1 million naira every day for 60 days. Reach for Millions today and redeem winnings with your empty packs at selected First Bank branches. Big 60th anniversary Reach for Millions promo. The more you buy, the more you can win, win, win. Pig, it's in you.
Introducing Dettol 175-gram family soap. Buy Dettol family soap for 200 naira and save 50 naira.
Dreams lie before me. Gotta seize the moment. Do you see it now? It's time from within. Oh, what a feeling. Oh, what a feeling.
Hollandia yogurt. Feel the goodness within. Flaunt the goodness outside. Hollandia yogurt. It's all good. House of Chi.
All right, thank you for rejoining us. We're looking at the issue of oil theft in Nigeria and what can be done to curtail it. And we have just joined us here in our Abuja studio, Dr. Chris Ikiyo. He is former Commissioner of Commerce and Industries. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good morning.
All right. Let me begin, Kingsley, with, let me quickly start with my question with Rear Admiral Medani. Rear Admiral, recently the Joint Task Force, destroyed quite a number of illegal refineries in the Niger Delta. And the past government, as I said earlier on, also employed or engaged the services of ex-militants to protect, the pipelines from vandalism and other activities of oil theft. Do you think that's the way to go?
Those are government policies which I will not question. But you should look at what can the Navy do vis-a-vis the problem we're talking of. Let us look at the space first. Nigeria has a coastline of 420 nautical miles and an exclusive economic zone that, if you multiply it by 30, gives you 84,000 square nautical miles. That's a huge space to patrol. Ms. Zainab and the gentleman in Lagos talked about intelligence and surveillance. I'm very happy he mentioned that. Now, you have to obtain information, fine, but the information has no use if you are not able to put it into action. And that is where we'll talk of real-time information, real-time intelligence, actionable intelligence. Right. Now, helicopters are critical to this. If we are going to patrol the entire creeks in the Niger Delta, it will consume a lot of resources. But if you have sufficient helicopters, it means you can vector your platforms to specific areas where something is happening. So this mixture are part of what is missing in the Navy. We estimate the minimum number of helicopters that is needed to be able to do a job in that place is 16. That is the minimum. We're talking about 48. How many do we have? 5. So you could see the gap in surveillance alone. And then you talk of patrol boats. The Niger Delta is huge. You need a minimum of 576 boats to be able to have effective presence in all the areas. We have less than 70. So you could see the gaps. Now, nobody is blaming anybody on this. These are national issues. Like I said, the last time the country made investment in the Navy was in the 70s. It has not made any investment since that time.
So, but the former president commissioned some
yes,
vessels.
I will come to that. There are the vessels that were...
The Shagari administration also commissioned a vessel or two, if I remember.
That is where we're talking of the 70s.
No, that was Shagari was late 70s to the
80s. Yes, that's why I put the 80s. The Aradu and other came in around 80. But what the public perhaps don't know about ships, ships are not like cars. You go into a showroom and buy them. If you pay for a ship now, it will take you a minimum of 18 months before you can get them. And it is not just to walk in and say it's available, because there are other people that have paid and probably they're waiting before you queue up. So the investment is a national decision that has to be made, and it's very critical. Then, apart from the investing, the most important is, I'm glad you mentioned now some ships were commissioned last year. What you perhaps don't know is 2 of those ships were ships that are already 30 years old.
The Tokumbo ships.
We got them from
Rear Admiral, this is not to diminish the significance of the point you just made. That was just a pun. Dr. Chris Akiyo was introduced earlier by my colleague Claire. Dr. Akiyo, I'm sure you've had the benefit of listening to the contributions of the other guests on this program. There is a huge national problem with regard to crude oil theft. We have it on land, and then we also have it offshore. What is your reaction to this? Some factors have been adduced. Why is this going on, and what can be done quickly, to bring the perpetrators to heel?
Well, okay, I think basically I listened to what has been said, a lot of hypotheses and all that. But the reality is that we have all come to terms with the fact that there is oil theft. the question will be that how is it possible in the presence, for instance, of the heavy security presence, the technologies required for such oil thieves to take the kind of magnitude it's taking, and then what are we doing to address it? In my own understanding, I think that we have either overplayed into the issues of addressing oil theft or downplayed our intelligence gathering. I have seen severally what is celebrated is maybe the military, the joint task force go into a community, pick up buckets of people trying to refine crude, maybe produce local diesel for survival and burn it. But that's not where it is. We're talking about billions of dollars being fretted away from our economy by calculated and organized, qualified people with a conspiracy theory. My understanding is that the oil majors are involved, the security agencies are involved, government is complicit, and then the communities also seemingly are comfortable because government is not responding to their earnings, so they just turn their back and allow these things happen. If you take the general was talking about helicopters. If you fly over the Niger Delta area up to Lagos and you see the amount of vessels on the high sea, you'll be amazed that all these vessels are holding crude from our shores. Unfortunately, I heard from President Jonathan said about 400,000 barrels per day was missing of the 2.5 million barrels being produced, and nothing was done by government. Now, my take is very clear. If we need to deal with this, the issue of transparency raised by Zainab is very key. People go and do the drilling, collect the product, and declare. Another agency goes there and says, this is what we have. Another agency goes and then pump to recognize vessels, as it were. So it's supposed to be classified and followed in due process. So you know what you get, what you're giving out. But in the line of production, something happens. A huge gap is created, and nobody is saying anything. In the line of distribution, something also happened. Another gap is created, and nobody is saying anything. Then also, in the line of collection, people collect, and then they don't declare what they have collected. And then we hear about crude swaps and all that, and then probably you send in 5 vessels out, you take 2 back, and you justify it. So the corruption really starts from the office, where paperwork are done to perfect the stealing. We need to have patriotic Nigerians to, first of all, deal with it. If somebody raised an alarm about product not getting to destination, or product being shortchanged, the economy being shortchanged via paperwork, somebody then takes an action to deal with what are those qualified vessels to come in our coastal ways to receive the product. But we have played into the hands of that big cabal by looking inwards and bothering about people who find spills and then go and get buckets of crude and cook them for refining. At best, what those people do is to carry crude, try to translate it to diesel, which is still not pure. That's the much they can achieve. If you mop up all the total crude that they are stealing and cooking via local refineries, you probably won't get a vessel of crude. We're talking about several vessels leaving our waterways. So I want to align, basically, that from the top to the bottom, we need to rework the system. Unbundling is one of it. There's too much power in the NNPC. They decide everything. So we need to unbundle it and then have agencies that have rights to see what they can do. As a commissioner, for instance, even the refined products have been stolen. So somebody goes, when they bring in the refined products into their tank farms and then they collect it, rather than send it to the destination, they try to find a way to send it to neighboring countries because they pay more for it. So you work in, and then those who collect locally have to also buy at higher than normal the subsidy price. And then you get to the pumps themselves are playing pranks at the pump level, and DPRO is sleeping. So the agencies themselves need to be reworked until you get that framework correct. Put all the security, put all the Navy in the place, they'll be compromised. These are human beings. The uniform is one thing, the human being is another thing. The human factor is always there. There's a criminal element in everybody. What has made a thief different from the other is that a thief has thrown away his conscience. So, but these other people, softly find a way to steal from the system.
Well, Dr. Chris Akiyo, well, thank you for your comments. In the meantime, let's return to Lagos, where Engineer Bala Zaka, has been with us. He's also a chartered accountant. Mr. Bala Zaka, the point is that there's some organized nature about this. If it's an industry, if it is being controlled by a mafia, what can we do with respect to the international leg of it? There are a number of countries just waiting that if you don't care, for your assets, I mean, what should be their business? But what can we do? What can the Nigerian government do to rein in, the buyers of stolen crude from our wells?
You see, we can't. I would personally, I would not be bothering myself first of all about fingerprinting if I can't resolve my problems at the grassroots. And I want to make something a bit clear. There is a difference between corruption in the oil and gas industry and crude oil theft. I want to believe we're talking about crude oil theft. And that was why I broke down that figures, to tankers. We need to sometimes break down things to the basis. Whatever figure we are given, just break it down to liters and place it in values and figures that Nigerians will understand. If you say it's 1 million barrels, 10 million, whatever, break it down to tankers. Nigerians will understand. But I'm surprised. If you're solving problems like this, you just have 3 stakeholders. The community, which is an environment of first impact, the investor, and the Nigerian government or the Nigerian economy. You start first with the community, because the Rear Admiral was saying we have about 6,000 creeks. If you like, give them the budget of Nigeria. That will not enable them to get all the helicopters to go around those creeks. So the first solution is that community or environment of first impact. What you just need is simple: education, education, education. You just need to let these people understand that that thing they call illegal refinery is not a refinery at all. It's a pollution plant. It's a carcinogenic plant. It's a toxification plant. That's what you need to do, and let everybody know. They are not refineries. They are not illegal refineries. They are pollution plants. They are carcinogenic plants, and they are destructive plants. So you let the community know, because the community is the first stakeholder. Let them know by the time you boil this crude oil, based on temperature differentials, right, you will have something, first of all, going into the atmosphere in your community. It will go, become carbonic acid, come down to your community, cause you all kinds of respiratory and bronchial problems. That's one. Then by the time they take away the light distillates, the middle and heavy distillates will be dropped on your community. It will biodegrade your soil. It will make your soil carcinogenic. That simply means you cannot go to farm. Your groundwaters will be destroyed. You will not have drinking water, you community of first impact. Another problem you are going to have as a community is this: the quantity that is dropped there, once it gets to the water or to the creeks or to the river, first of all, your soil you cannot farm because it's destroyed. Then on the waters again, it will pollute your water, destroy aquatic lives. And even predators that come there cannot prey on aquatic life because they will be suffering from what we technically call hypothermia, and that's temperature differentials. So at the end, you community or environment of first impact, you are doomed. You are going to suffer health doom, you are going to suffer social doom, you are going to suffer economic doom. Immediately you educate the community like that, the community will now know the implication, and the community will now come in as a stakeholder and will help you in giving information, will now collaborate. It will not allow people who bring in pollution plants in the name of illegal refineries. So you get the support from the first point of vulnerability, that first point of impact. That is the community. It is the community and people in the community that will know that 2,000 tankers means a lot. At that point, they will not allow satanic agents to collude, even if those agents are from their community. That in that case, they will now start helping security agents and helping people like the Rear Admiral with information and helping people like Zainab and the rest. You just have to approach it from there. Then by the time you go to the next stakeholder, which is the investor, we need to understand that it will make the investor to lose revenue, the investor will lose equipment, the investor will be forced to do what? To sack staff, and sometimes the investor will be forced to do what? To divest out of our economy, which is dangerous. and to the national economy. Of course, it will affect Nigerians' integrity on the international pedestal. Then it will affect the aggregate economy based on what comes into Nigeria, because the oil and gas revenue is still the oxygen of Nigerians' revenue till as we speak. So the first thing, let's go to that environment or community of first impact. By the time we finish educating them, you will be surprised at the level of cooperation we are going to get from them, and even surveillance. And by the time they start giving information out, there will be so much information for cross-fertilization.
Mr. Balazaka, thank you. Thank you for your perspective. I think I will just get back to Dr. Chris Ekiyo here in the studio quickly. It's Chris, this is the last question for you. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, that's the native boss, earlier on said that the probable reason why those large vessels, the very large crude carrying vessels were banned on our shores is probably to check those of them operating illegally, although some of them have come to say, look, have protested the ban, saying no illegality has been brought against them. But do you think our laws needs to be smoothened out, so that we don't also lose our investors?
Yeah, I've always said that we have so many laws already in this country that can make things work. The problem usually is, do we implement them? That's the point. These laws are already enabling laws that should allow us to do best practice, internationally accepted standard. But we circumvent the laws. The individuals, because they're corrupt and want to rob the system, the economy, the country, and the rest of us, will bend it backwards and allow those criminality to occur. So I think that so far so good, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to just, first of all, enforce existing laws. For instance, we have said that we should stop gas flaring. We have not been able to implement that. And I think that until we begin to look at the laws and get them implemented, enforce it with altruist motive, we will continue to go back and forth with this. I hear him talk about the communities. Communities are powerless, very powerless about this issue. First, they don't get access to the crude. A lot of people in Nigeria don't even know what crude oil look like. A very few elitists have been able to colonize certain clique of people who do this business in clandestine areas within the Niger Delta Creek. And I keep saying that unless you break the barriers of culpability of this conspiracy theory, the community is just one small fraction at the end. They can't even stop it. People who do these things sometimes are not even from that community. They just come, take over the process, and they do their business there, undermining the community. And I said to you, community is cooperating because in any case, there is no job for them. This provides some kind of job. And they perceive already that they were dying, even when these local refineries were not there. They're underdeveloped. There's no water. The farmlands are not working. So if this is what this additional little will give us lifeline, we'll turn our back. But we need to start from the top. Get these laws to work. Get these laws to catch up with the criminals, big-time criminals. It will send the right signals to the small-time criminals, because these big-time criminals kind of provide covers for the small-time criminals. We need to support the security agents. Of course, there must be what I call, what I've always said, that the equity of communities. If communities begin to have a sense of ownership, that this oil belongs to us, then they will go the extra mile to protect the facilities.
All right, Dr. Chris Ekiyo, I would like to thank you for your contributions to our conversation this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then from our Lagos Network Center, I would like to thank the two gentlemen who've been with us. Two of them are petroleum engineers. First, I would like to thank Engineer Emeka Ene, who is chairman of Society of Petroleum Engineers. Thank you for being with us. And also the engineer and chartered accountant, Mr. Balazaka. Thank you for your contributions to our conversation this morning. Okay, and with us, the Abuja studios would like to thank Rear Admiral Medani. Thank you for your contributions.
Thank you. I thought I could maybe just have a little response to something that was said about the security agencies.
Yes, very briefly. Because
very briefly. I think it's important that both the elite and the public should encourage security agencies by understanding their challenges. Sweeping statements, security agencies are conniving, is not, I think, the right attitude to it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Quickly, Rear Admiral Obiora Charles Medani, thank you very much for coming to speak with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Quickly now to sports, it was mixed fortune for Nigerian teams in the 2016 Olympic qualification race. Super Falcons crashed out while Dream Team qualify for African Under-23 Championship in Senegal to further seek for the Rio Olympics ticket. Here is Musbad and Wahab with all the details.
All right, good morning and welcome. It was another interesting weekend in the world of sports as we take a look at some top stories now. Nigeria Under-23 team, Dream Team, has qualified for the second African Under-23 Championship final in Senegal. The Samson Siasia-led team, which headed for the second leg with a slim 2-1 advantage over Congo from the first leg in Port Harcourt, played a barren draw in Pointe-Noire, Congo-Brazzaville to seal their qualification. The Dream Team will now compete in the 8th-nation African Under-23 Championship final in Senegal, where the 3 African representatives in the 2016 Rio Olympics will emerge. Host Senegal, Algeria, Zambia, Egypt, South Africa and Tunisia have earlier qualified for the finals to be staged 28 November to 11 December. Meanwhile, Nigeria's senior women national team, Falcons, crashed out of the Rio 2016 Olympics qualifiers after disappointing 2-1 defeat in extra time against Equatorial Guinea on Sunday. It is the second time in a row Nigeria will miss out of the event after they lost via a penalty lottery to Cameroon during London 2012 Olympic qualifying series. The reigning African champions suffered a 3-2 aggregate loss against the 2-time African Women Championship winners in Bata. Falcons led 1-0 until the 86th minute when the host netted an equalizer. At extra time, the Super Falcons lost their defensive composure and were punished for it in the 112th minute as the Zanlag National made it 2-1. And that's a quick one from the world of sports this morning. The program is winding now. Do enjoy the rest of it and have a great week ahead.
All right, thank you, Musbat Dan Wahab, and we're moving on now. We, of course, just before we round up Kingsley, we must apologize. We were unable to connect with Nigeria's permanent representative at the UN, Professor Joy Ogu. We tried.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think there were some connection problems that we had, and but also we are unable to take some of our other segments. But we'll check out the weather forecast for the rest of the day.
For joining us on today's weather segment. Today we expect thunderstorms to affect places around Kano, Jigawa, Bauchi, Gombe and southern Jos, while rains we expect over Taraba through Nasarawa and the FCT. Elsewhere it will be cloudy. Later in the day, we expect localized thunderstorms to affect the extreme northern cities and the central state, though much earlier over the eastern flank than the western axis. Localized rains we expect over the inland of the southeast and east coast, while there is a possibility of light rain over Lagos. And for temperature forecast, here are the graphics. That's it on today's forecast. See you again.
All right, see you again, Freddie Dowu from the Weather Center. Thank you. And that rounds of Good Morning Nigeria for today. I'm Claire Delabo Abdulrazak. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadola. I also join Claire in thanking you for starting your day with us. The program Good Morning Nigeria will be back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning.